Hello, my name's Haonik, and welcome to my second episode of An Honest Review. In this series, I look at a tank's stats, compare it to other tanks at the same tier with similar roles, and figure out if the tank is actually worth playing or not. And I'm switching up the format a little bit in these videos. Instead of showing a mastery game and splitting the video into different sections, it'll just be one part, and it's just going to be me talking about the tank stats and comparing it while showing gameplay. And now with all that out of the way, let's talk about the WZ-110. Reviewing two Chinese tanks back to back, Mao Zedong is smiling at me now, although he might not be smiling after he hears what I have to say about this tank. I think this alone covers all I need to say. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Unfortunately, that is not the end of this video because I promised myself that I would do a video on this tank. For this review, I will be comparing it to the T-32, Tiger II, and IS-3. So starting out in firepower, we can see that it actually has the second best DPM right underneath the Tiger II. However, it does have the worst penetration on its AP rounds. Its alpha damage is the same as the T-32 and the Tiger II, but worse than the IS-3. Its rate of fire is slightly slower than the Tiger II's, but faster than the T-32's and the IS-3's. It also has a 100mm gun, which is the worst out of the four. The Tiger II and the T-32 both have a 105, and the IS-3 has a 122. And it has the second to worst shell velocity, slightly better than the T-32's. Moving down to the weapon handling, I'm gonna start mixing the firepower and weapon handling categories together because it just makes sense in my opinion to do that. But as you can see here, it has the same aim time as the T-32 and Tiger II. I'm gonna mainly compare it to the T-32 and Tiger II for this section because the IS-3's gun is much different in terms of accuracy. And as we can see, there's not much to write home about. It has the same dispersion as the Tiger II, and slightly better than the T-32's, but its dispersion when moving is the worst out of these two tanks, not to mention 6 degrees of gun depression, which is really bad. I really don't like this gun. Its accuracy is subpar at most, and you will just miss the absolute stupidest shots. Combined with its 6 degrees of gun depression, this tank's gun, in my opinion, is a nightmare to play. While the T-32's dispersion value is worse, and the IS-3's is obviously no better, its dispersion is still horrible when you move. When you move in this tank, your gun booms out so much, and when you combine that with 6 degrees of gun depression, this gun does not really cut it. And to top it all off, it has the worst penetration out of all of these tanks. Like, you are so much better off playing a Tiger II over this tank. Moving down to mobility, don't let a first glance at this chart fool you, because you can see a lot of red in this chart, which obviously means that the WZ-110 is better in these aspects. It has the highest top speed out of these tanks, but it has horrible engine power. It's not the heaviest tank, but because of the poor engine power, it gets a terrible power to weight ratio. While the Tiger II has it worse, the Tiger II is also way heavier than this tank. Its effective horsepower isn't the greatest, but it does get the best terrain resistance out of all these tanks, so you can feel sluggish whatever terrain you're on. Now what's really funny here is it has the best camo out of all these heavy tanks. Here's the thing, it's a heavy tank, so that literally does not matter, because you're going to be on the front lines no matter what. Unless you're in the back of the map sniping, of course, and if that's the case, I'll help you sign up to where you belong. I really don't have much to say about the mobility on this tank. The only time you really get up to 40 is when you're going downhill. You can get up to 40 on flat terrain, but it takes a decent amount of time to actually get there. And moving down to the miscellaneous/extras category, we can see, oh boy, that is a lot of green. This tank makes the least amount of credits out of all of these tanks. It has the worst view range with the IS-3. it has the least amount of hit points with the IS-3, and it has some of the worst armor out of all of these heavy tanks. Going back earlier, you could argue that the gun on this tank is actually better than the T-32's gun, but the T-32 has much better armor. Not to mention its gun depression, so you can actually go into much better hold down positions than you can in this tank. I'm actually going to show an example on screen right here. This tank's armor isn't paper if you angle it properly, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's still the worst out of all of these tanks. The IS-3 technically has worse armor, but the thing with the IS-3 is it's kind of a peek and pull back heavy tank. Meanwhile, this is more meant to be a frontline heavy tank. And going down to the Blitz Stars data in the past 90 days, I'm just not surprised this is the worst performing heavy tank. Yes, it has the least amount of players, but who in their right mind would actually want to play this thing? I've seen people say that this tank is better than the IS-3, but I respectfully disagree because I would rather play an IS-3 over this tank any day. I think my final thoughts on this tank are, don't play it. If you can use free XP to skip past this tank, I would definitely do that. And if you can't do that, the tips I have for this tank are never ever go into an elevated position because you are not going to have any gun depression to shoot down. Not to mention, this tank has a very weak lower hull. Be prepared to shoot a lot of premium in this tank because it has very poor penetration. And then my last tip is pray, because you're definitely gonna need it when you play this tank. I unfortunately had to start this video a little bit late, but I plan on making the next one even better with a lot more edits in it. But I think that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.